Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production here at YouTube, and welcome to episode number 1 of From the Mausoleum, a brand new series that I have come up with. Now, the concept for this series is very simple, and that's basically me taking either requests or just looking at things, at stuff that's definitely obscure. Stuff that at least is not stuff that you're going to expect to see a lot on the Album of the Week episodes. And anything that's beyond the reviews. And the reason I've come up with this series and why I wanted to kind of make this series be more focused on this quality of stuff is, well, simple again. Again, using the word simple again. Is that since I'm always getting requests from at least Paul of Doomsday Records to look at stuff that's not really brand new releases, but more older, more obscure stuff. Like, again, stuff that might have been released in the 90s or the 80s, or let's go far back into the 70s, you know, that's really kind of flew under the radar, and stuff that's very undecisive of what month or something, you know, stuff that I would say that would fit these days as part of the Album of the Week episodes. But yeah, it's stuff that I think is a little bit unnecessary to be part of the review series, because since I want the review series to be more focused on brand new stuff. And so, since I'm always getting a lot of requests for older, more obscure releases, it puts me in a rock and hard place. And that's what I was feeling like for the past couple of days or so, until finally the light bulb turned on pretty much in my head. Again, the light bulb turned on, and I'm like, I got the solution. Come up with a series that would be more useful for this, for requests, and anything else that I might want to look at, that I want to showcase on the channel, that's, again, might not be worth look for, let's say the review series, or something that's just I can't fit into the scheduling for the Album of the Week episodes, or the series. So this is the only compromise. Come up with a series like this, and that's where I come up with From the Mausoleum, where again I can take requests for much more older, more obscure metal releases or rock releases. And the first one today, again, it comes to you from a request of Paul of Doomsday Records, and that is the debut full-length album from the really obscure, again, I'm throwing this word around a lot in this episode, from Brazilian progressive death metal band Mordeth. Again, it's Lux and Tenebris. Again, released in 1993 through Heavy Metal Rock Records, originally released only on 12-inch vinyl or record, then later on would be re-released on CD in like 1995 and then 2020 again through, of course, Heavy Metal Rock Records, with the inclusion of the Dimension of Death EP, which came right before it. So without further ado, since I've already spent some time going into the description and the concept of what From the Mausoleum is, let's get into my overall thoughts on Lux and Tenebris from Mordeth, since this band is going to be featured in the brand new fanzine or issue of Paul of Doomsday Records Death by Metal fanzine. So let's get into it, folks. Alright, before I really get into my overall thoughts on Lux and Tenebris by Mordeth, you know what I have to do? I have to do a track listing rundown so I can tell you folks where the songs were on this album, how many songs were on this album, and what's the time length for this album. And since we have at least about 9 tracks here, technically it's actually 8 songs, but it's at least with one, opening instrumental. I don't know, something is repeating here, because I already featured an album on this channel that kind of had this sort of same style track listing in a way. You should know which one I'm referring to. If you haven't seen that episode already, it's brand new. It was on Monday. But again, it's 9 tracks, so it at least clocks in at 42 minutes and 32 seconds. So these 9 tracks are beginning with the 1 minute and 31 minute intro that's titled Vox and Tenebris. Finally, we then get into the real song of the album, that being Mordeth. Then into MP66, Starvation, Brain Necrosis, Towards Nothing, Benedict 6 Orbital Camp, The Masks of God, and then finally ending with Septiform. So there's your 9 tracks. Now, to kind of get into a little bit of a brief rundown for the history of Mordeth, again, they were based out of Rio Claro, Sao Paulo, Brazil, and they were formed all the way back in 1989, and they released their very first demo in 1990, then finally following up with their Dimensions of Death EP in 1992, and then finally, here we are with their debut full-length album, which is Lux and Tenebris, released in 1993. Now, it's not specified what month or day that this album was released in, but it was released in 1993. And of course, since then, they've released a whole bunch of stuff since, and of course, eventually, and I'll get into some other sort of details about these guys after when I review, after just going through my thoughts on Lux and Tenebris. Now, to give you a little brief rundown of my sort of history with the sort of Brazilian stuff, normally there was a point in my time where I just went through anything that was at least Brazilian. Ever since being just turned on to bands like Sepultura and Sarcophago and Atomica and Sex Trash, another band. And there was another one too, Mutilator and Holocausto and Chekhol. And even, there's even another, The Mist. Which, again, I just reviewed the recent EP from The Mist. And just all these kind of bands. There was just a point where I was just like, I was diving into the sort of past stuff, of the Brazilian metal scene. I just was so into it. For some reason, Mordeth just seemed to have been one of those that just went under my radar. And how I just got turned on to these guys, again, is thanks to Paul of Doomsday Today Records, who hit me up on my Gmail account, again, NastyMetalProductions at gmail.com. Again, self-promotion there again. He, of course, had requested that I should review this release, that I should review Lux and Tenebris. And I was like, it's released in 1993. And I want to focus the reviews series on brand new stuff. So how am I supposed to kind of do this? How do I attack this? And I know in the past I've done a lot of some of his reissues and everything. But again, those were reissues, and those kind of did fit because they were still very recent reissues. Again, part of his cassette reissue label, again, Doomsday Today Records, and it kind of worked. But since this hasn't been reissued under his label, and this is just a more, again, it was reissued in 2020, but again, he sent me a YouTube link to listen to it through there. Again, it was a full, it's an upload of being, a full album, where it's like, again, at the length of 42 minutes and 32 seconds. And I'm like, how am I supposed to attack this? How am I supposed to actually present this on my channel as a review, and not, since I've already been overbooked already with the Album of the Week episodes, and I really couldn't fit this in. I'm just like, how do I work with this? Well, this is the best way I could come up with, and that's, again, was for the series, which I came into. So finally, since I already mapped down what I want to do for it, come up with a brand new series, that means it's finally to get into and listen to Lux and Tenebris. And to my surprise, even though this definitely has that Brazilian sound, I mean, I did check out, of course, the Dimensions of Death EP, and that right there is typical sort of Brazilian metal, very much in the sort of same vein as like early Sepultura and Sarcophago and Sex Trash and some of those kind of bands, where it's really very chaotic and very brutal sounding. This is where it's a little different though with Lux and Tenebris, because this one does a lot more. Let's just say this one definitely seems to play around a lot more with more spacier, more progressive. This is where you can tell they really start to become a little bit more progressive, and especially when it comes to a Brazilian metal band of this kind of caliber, this is a lot more different because you're not expecting like the typical Sarcophago or Sepultura, like Morbid Visions, or like that kind of sound. You're not expecting that. I mean, I know those bands kind of played around with more progressive leanings, especially with Sarcophago at times on the Rotting EP or the mini album, I guess that they refer to as, or let's say the Mist on, let's say, albums like Phantasmagoria or some of the later ones, or even Chackle, where they kind of did play around a little bit some progressive leanings, but it still was more straight up thrash. This one, on the other hand, you really can. The one band that Mordeth seems to get compared to a lot is Nocturnus from Florida. And that's because of a lot of the more spacier kind of vibe that they give off. Now, I think later on, Mordeth probably really kind of adopted even more edged out a lot of those progressive leanings, where they probably really did turn into the Brazilian or Brazil's answer to Nocturnus. But on here, it's almost like if, let's say, Sarcophago or even, let's say, a Sex Trash, those kind of bands, or early Sepultura, really kind of wanted to be more progressive in a way. Not, let's say, something, let's say, like Voivod. I mean, I can kind of get a little bit of Voivod leanings, but it's not nearly that kind of elaborate, where it's something like you spend like Dimension Hatros, or even just some of those later Voivod albums from the late 80s, or Killing Technology. Even though, again, it's a lot more primitive, more raw, and again, almost really pushes towards being very... It's definitely on a more death metal level, but again, in the Brazilian way. I know I once had somebody comment on my channel where I was talking about the Brazilian stuff, saying that it's not death metal, it's its own thing, trying to be cute and everything, and I was like, fucking idiot. But still, they do have their own feel to it, very similar to even, let's say, like Germany, when they had where their brand of thrash metal is a lot more different compared to the American style of thrash metal. But so with Mordeth and the sort of Brazilian style, let's say, of extreme metal, it's definitely can be very raw, and it's definitely more primitive and more different. And when they're tackling on a style that was a lot more refined by the American bands, for example, like Nocturnus in Florida, when they're tackling that style, it comes across a lot more different. But at the same time, you can tell that they really are kind of going for that, and that's what I tend to get a lot from here. It's definitely a lot more spacier in some cases, more progressive compared to a lot of the more Brazilian bands. But at the same time, it does have that Brazilian flair to it, and that I think makes it really interesting, makes it more regional, and I actually really dig it. And especially with songs like Mordeth and MP66 and Brain Necrosis and Towards Nothing and The Massive God and Septiform. A lot of these songs, they'll play around that might be very doomy, very slow, but as it goes on, it'll be fast, but you can get a lot of that kind of very spacey aspects, and they're throwing in a little bit of synths here and there. And it's just really interesting. It's a lot different. And to kind of hear a Brazilian band that actually ends up being the Brazil's answer to like Nocturnus is so different. I know there's even like Pestilence that did kind of this side of feel as well with, was it Spheres? And again, there's that going on. But again, it's just a lot more raw, and to some people, it might be more sloppy, but that's the Brazilian charm, and that's what I find so cool about this album. And there's just so good. I would say I can't really go into any like song reviews. I can't really kind of give you each song definitions. I can't really talk about each one. Instead, I think since you might be already interested already. If you love stuff like Nocturnus, the best way to really listen to Lux in Tenebris is if you listen to it in its entirety. And me talking about it, I don't think is going to do the sound much justice. I just gave you a really good idea of what to kind of expect from this. So I'd say listen to it on your own and really just you do yourself a favor and come up with your own sort of your opinion and everything about this one, because I think it's more better if you listen to it yourself than me talking about it. But again, the whole basis of this is to kind of turn you on to it and give my own little opinion about this sound, and it's just so different, and I really dig it, and it's very interesting, and it's a freaking cool album, but from beginning to end, it's a really cool album. So that's all I'm going to say, and I'm definitely thanking Paul of Doomsday Records for turning me on to this album. Again, what a really cool release, and I can't wait to showcase more cool releases like this on the From the Mausoleum series here. So there we go. So pretty much after Lux in Tenebris what was released, they did go on. They released an EP in 1995 titled Cyber Gods. And by the time in 1997, while they were recording their second full-length album that's titled Amicide, they pretty much ended up splitting up. Eventually, the album did get released in 2001, but that was a while up until 2008 when the band decided to reform, and in 2009, they released their comeback EP titled Robotic Dreams. And that was for a while, and they were definitely reformed, but again, they didn't release anything else after 2009 until 2018. I know there was a live release that was mostly of a older recording from 1990, around probably the period before, The Benches of Death. But eventually they released their comeback full-length album in 2018 titled The Unknown Knows. So there we go. That's pretty much it for Mordeth and, of course, Lux in Tenebris. This was a really cool album. I really dug it. So, and I hope all of you dig it as well. Again, if you can score a copy on, let's say, either Discogs or eBay, or let's say even on Amazon, or by some weird, crazy chance you find this out in the wild, pick it up. It's worth checking out. So again, thank you to Paul of Doomsday Records for turning me on to Lux in Tenebris by Mordeth. So with that, I hope all of you enjoyed, and I hope all of you enjoyed this first episode in this brand new series, and I hope all of you are looking forward to anything else from the series, and I hope you're very receptive of this idea. So there we go. Hope all of you enjoyed. This is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.